We are back with Undermine, and it's episode 12. Welcome. We just hit a dozen episodes of Undermine Season 4, and we hope you're all enjoying it. As you know, during this season of Undermine, we'll be discussing some big shows of the 90s with show highlights. So if you didn't have time to do the homework, you can always listen to them afterwards. It would be awkward, though, if you tried to play this particular show while we're talking, mostly because the lassie whistling might make you go crazy. My co-host today is Osiris CEO RJB. Hi, RJ.
Hello, Thomas. I knew we'd finally get here to my favorite Phish jam of all time. That's a spoiler alert, or maybe not an alert, just a spoiler. And it's basically the reason that I want to do this season, just so we could do this episode. So now we're finally here. It's interesting. Every show we're talking about this season is amazing. Like, I feel like every show we've talked about, we come away being like, wow. I mean, and that's sort of the point. But this one for me completely changed everything. This is 12/29/94 from Providence, Rhode Island. And, this show's all about the David Bowie. It's one of the most revered and longest Phish jams of all time. Like I said, it happens to be my favorite. But it's also a show that's significant in other ways that I don't always think about. I typically just listen to the Bowie over and over, but it was the night before Phish's first show at Madison Square Garden, the end of this huge year, right? I mean, 94 was this year when Phish was really just touring nationally in amphitheaters and large venues for the first time. It was the birth of this kind of type 2 jamming. It was the year they released Hoist, their most commercially successful album up to that point. And I know we're going to talk about where you were in 94, Tom, and all of this, but there's just it's just such a great show. And I think it helps put this whole era in perspective.
Absolutely. I'm honored to be here for your very favorite Phish jam, RJ.
I've talked to Tom about this jam a lot. It's been some one-way conversations, but now we'll have a two-way conversation about it. All right. So if you're enjoying this season, and thanks for all the feedback and all the comments and all the social media messages, it's really helpful to hear from everyone. But please consider subscribing to Osiris Premium on Apple, where you can get ad-free podcasts, bonus episodes, and more. Okay, Tom, we have a really, really friendly guest today.
We do. One of our best Osiris podcasts is called Broke Down Podcast, and it's hosted by our guest. His name is Jonathan Hart, and he's co-hosted the Helping Friendly podcast also since 2014. He is a longtime fan, a friend, and also a musician. And let me bring him in from the waiting room right now. And welcome, Jonathan, to Undermine.
Hey, guys.
Hey, Jonathan, how you doing?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So here we are in December 1994, and we're so happy to talk to people that are actually at the show that we're talking about. We've had a few misses where I'm not going to blame our guests, but I'm going to blame our research department. And people have shown up who, for whatever reason, weren't at the show that we were talking about. But this isn't the case. Could you tell us what was your Phish journey up to this point?
Well, I had been listening to Phish in earnest for at least a couple of years, and this was my third show. My first being that fall, October 8th, and my second being the night before this one at 12/28 in Philadelphia. And that was pretty great. And then we had a disturbing, exciting drive post-show all the way up to Providence after that to be in place for this one.
Disturbing?
It was an adventure. Once we figured out that we didn't want to go all the way to Atlantic City and we got pointing in the right direction, pre-GPS, then, I drove, 4.5 hours to Providence in the middle of the night. And the car decided to die on us on the way a little bit, but I fixed it with a swift kick, and it got us the rest of the way there and home.
Wow.
So,
that's amazing. Yeah. Jonathan, you were living in Virginia at the time?
Yes.
And you still are?
I still am.
Why that show, or why those two shows? Like, how did you end up in Providence?
So I still believe it was a good idea to split my time with Phish and Grateful Dead. And so that's what I was doing in the fall. I saw Phish in my backyard, basically, in October, and then spent the next 3 nights at the Cap Center. And we still call that best week ever. And then when the New Year's run was announced, I looked at it. I was like, well, we can go to Philly. We should go to at least another. I didn't really have a lot of money. Certainly not staying in Manhattan money or, going to Boston money. So we chose to go to Providence and turn around and come home. I don't know if it was a great idea to skip the other 2 shows, but at least we went to the first 2 and I have no regrets about that.
That is great. Well, I want to we're going to talk about the set 2 in detail a little bit later, but we've talked about this show at length, you and I have on other podcasts, and I'm still just like amazed that you were able to be there. People have said that to me about like Dayton 97 or, other shows, mostly 97 shows, but I just can't imagine this sort of experience. And I want to know, just thinking about the first set, before we get in.
Is that, RJ, because you hang out with people roughly your age and Dayton 97 is like the people your age group start going to Phish shows?
Probably. I mean, I think there are some younger fans who, there's so many new Phish fans, over the past 5 years or so, that there are people who were like, 7 years old in 97. So they're
exactly.
like, it's so cool that you were at these shows. And
right.
It is interesting though. Like, 'cause there's also just like the people who are so 97 centric, which is probably a lot of the people listening and watching this, because that's where we're going. We
are going to focus on 97. Yeah. But, like, I guess I got 14 or 15 years on you, RJ. So yeah, like hearing someone say that they're at this show doesn't surprise me, but I know I kind of get what you're talking
right.
about. Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Jonathan, you've said this last when we were talking before, but the kind of opening of this show, and I want to kind of talk about the first set and then more context and then get into the second set. This combo of Runaway Jim, Foam, if I could, to me, just amazing combo to open the show. Beautiful versions. That was like, I mean, could you tell at that point in your Phish going career that this was like a special show unfolding?
I think you kind of can, and I think maybe I did. So you can hear in Runaway Jim that Trey's kind of pushing against it. He's trying to lean against the rails a little. They don't quite go off of them, but you can hear it's there, and it's a really nice transition into Foam. And, that pairing Jim Foam wasn't crazy at the time, but it was a great opener. And yeah, I obviously had no idea what's to come, but you could tell that they were feeling good. And the night before had been very solid, so that was also a good indicator. And then if I could, that's still my only version of that song.
No way, really?
Yeah. And it's beautiful.
Great first set. As RJ mentioned, this is the night before their first show at MSG. And then you mentioned, Jonathan, they kind of bouncing around a little bit. It was a weird New Year's run in terms of travel for the band and obviously for the fans. You wound up in Atlantic City almost. It started in Philly on the 28th, which I went to, and then this night in Providence, which I missed because that's up north, knowing that on the 30th they were coming back down to me in MSG, and I went to that with my wife. Back then we had floor seats. I'm not a floor seat guy anymore, because there are no floor seats anymore.
There's no seats.
Yeah. Back then the floor had rows and rows of folding chairs, and it was great. But the cool thing about that day, and I know we're talking, I'm talking the next day now, the 30th, and we're going to get back to this show. But Trey had given me one ticket for David Letterman, which taped earlier at 5 p.m. So I got to go to that. And I just wanted to mention that they played Chalk Dust Torture, which was good for me. But everyone was expecting something, I think, from Hoist. And, like Sample or Down with Disease or Julius with Horns or something. But Letterman apparently requested Chalk Dust personally and said that it was his favorite, which was kind of unusual. And they're like,
how do you say no to that?
Exactly. How can you say no if he requests that? So back to this night in Providence. The atmosphere is festive and you can hear it from the band, and it almost sounds like a New Year's show in itself. Do you sense that kind of, Jonathan?
I mean, it was festive. Everybody was very excited. It was weird too outside. So it was, of course, Philly had been not warm. Providence was cold, and there's no real lot per se. It was all parking garages. And I definitely spent a not insignificant amount of time lost in parking garages that afternoon. But after the wait to get in, we were just excited, and we sat behind Fishman and very low right behind John Fishman, and had just an amazing view, and everybody was pumped. And they just kept up the energy with Split Open and Melt, which gets kind of properly weird, not too deeply.
And so fast too.
Yeah.
So fast. It's amazing.
Horse Silent is really good. Uncle Pen rips. I love that. I love all the bluegrass numbers though. And Trey introduces Phish as Luke Skywalker, and I didn't know. Such a wild time. And then Possum is, I guess, straight ahead, but just an absolute rage fest, right?
It's got this, the whole thing. We talked about this a little bit before we started recording. We'll talk about it about the second set, but even the Possum and the Split Open and Melt have these like dark, they're in these like dark kind of, this is like the really beginning of evil Phish in 94, a lot of those fall 94 jams have that. And I do think this is kind of like the beginning of type 2 improv, like summer, fall 94. And I feel like you're hearing this like weird, it stays pretty dark throughout the first set in some of those jams.
It really does. And, they spent time dabbling, is dabbling the right word, pushing into those areas in the fall tour. And so I just feel like it was almost like a switch on Trey's guitar. They could just go there at this point. They were already just ready to kind of veer into weird, dark spaces if they wanted.
There's a long tradition of musicians like selling their soul to be able to play, you know what I mean? And it's like, if you're in the right headspace, and you often are at Phish shows, or at least my friends were, and me, you can almost convince yourself that, they're somehow veering into an evil place, but coming out with more talent, but they're trading something for it. And we're there witnessing the transaction.
They're dabbling in the dark arts backstage, and it's just percolating out onto the audience.
Exactly.
It's amazing. Like it is it's a really well balanced first set. You have these quiet, beautiful moments. You have these crazy jams. I mean, it's such a good first set. And I will admit, like typically I just go and I listen to the Bowie, once every few months, but it's a really good and well balanced show, and the energy and the festive nature, like Tom said, I mean, it's just so, listening to the whole show, you can just feel it. It's just like, it's just very exciting.
I mean, it's a complete show. They do not fail to let up from the beginning to the end. It just happens to have this massive presence in second set.
Massive presence. Okay, well, I think we're going to do a quick ad break, and we're going to do it now. Do it now. We're right back. Have you ever wondered what it would feel like if your investments reflected what matters most to you? At Green Future Wealth Management, the advisors specialize in helping clients manifest their values in their financial lives. Green Future Wealth Management was founded by certified financial planner practitioner and longtime fan Nick Cantrell, named by Forbes as one of the top next-gen wealth advisors in the country. Whether you are just getting started or have complex investing and financial planning needs, visit them on the web at greenfuturewealth.com. You can sign up for the email list or take the Investing Values quiz. When you feel ready, schedule a free virtual consultation. In appreciation for the amazing Phish community and the incredible work being done by fans across the country, Green Future Wealth Management will be donating 10% of asset management proceeds from new Osiris listener clients to Fans for Racial Equity. Just be sure to mention Osiris when booking your appointment. Create your green future. Securities offered through Cambridge Investment Research, Inc., member FINRA/SIPC. Advisory services offered through Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, Inc. Cambridge and Green Future Wealth are not affiliated.
And we are back.
So, Jonathan, we were talking a little bit earlier about this Fall 94. There's some huge gems in Fall 94, like some that were significant enough to be featured on a live one. And, there's a lot that happened that fall. But this to me is the biggest. Can you set the stage for us, so to speak, in terms of the beginning of the second set and just your thoughts on the Bowie going into it?
Well, I can't not mention the perfect Gaiuti that opened. This is, as I mentioned earlier, this is my third show. This is also my second Gaiuti. The first Gaiuti I saw was the second Gaiuti. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yes, I think so.
And so I was excited to see it again, and it 100% delivers. It is, like I said, a perfect example of what this song can do. And they do that, and we're all very pumped, like, yes, set 2, that was awesome. What now? And then Trey starts making weird noises.
Yes.
And I don't think I was familiar with the phrase or title digital delay loop jam that Phish.net tags on here at the time, but I kind of knew what Trey was doing. But it didn't register as anything more than a very cool, very weird thing that was going to become something else. I was like, oh, they're just starting weird. Okay. I'm there for that. And then Fishman kind of told us what song we were going to hear with his, so we knew what we were in for. Some of us, somebody called Maze, right?
That digital delay, I feel like it comes back. Like, do they ever use it in other things? Have you guys heard it? It seems like it's like maybe they use it for something in their live streams or something. Anyway, I feel like they've reused it in something, but I can't tell you what. But it's great, and I keep expecting the whole band to join in, but instead they play the weird kind of Bowie intro on top of it. They don't ever kind of. I expected Fishman just to jump in with that rhythm, and he doesn't.
Yeah,
it's
no,
wild.
They just kind of let Trey roll with it and support it, and then just build around it.
Yeah,
which works well.
And to your question, Tom, there is on Phish.net there is a digital delay loop jam sort of song entry, and it was basically 10 times between 94 and 97.
Oh.
But there are pieces of that that. I think I know what you're saying. Like and then there's like the Dave's Energy Guide sort of thing, which also is a little bit referenced here, although, that could start a large debate.
There are definitely people who wrote Dave's Energy Guide in their notes for this. And I think there were probably some behind the scenes Phish.net fights about it. But I think this is definitely a digital delay loop jam or David Bowie intro, extended David Bowie intro.
But it's something different.
Yeah.
It's something very different. And even up to like 9 minutes in, so they go through the song structure, and then there's this like quiet part but it's still like very unsettling, and there between like the minutes 9 and 16, there's just this like brooding darkness that it's almost, I can't even really explain it, but I know that like 12 months prior to this, there's no way something like this would have been played by this band. It's just like, it's all this.
I don't even call it darkness. They're like opening the doors. They're inviting evil into the room.
They really are. It's like it's a summoning ceremony.
Yeah, exactly.
In fact, maybe that's what we should rename digital delay loop jam.
Yeah,
summoning ceremony.
That Mike's like, where it sounds like Mike starts playing almost like 2001, right?
Yeah.
At some point in there. And that feels to me like we're like sitting in on band practice, and I don't know what the fuck's going on.
Trey is almost on board with that 2001 kind of thing. But yeah, there's a lot of really cool spaces achieved very early before they completely drop out of tempo. Page moves over to the synthesizer like 13 minutes in. That's right before the 2001 thing. So then there's this thing that I label in my notes is the devil march that happens, in like the 12 minutes. And then again, it comes out of like, it leads into that 2001. Mike changes it. So that's when Trey kind of hints at 2001, and it kind of builds into these ascending chords and speeds up. But none of that kind of continues for very long. They're all very close together. So Trey just devolves into feedback. Page goes back to piano. And then really only Phish is keeping it up. And there's that moment of intense peaks at like 19 minutes or so. It was just about the most Bowie thing that has happened since they finished the intro section, right? And then that's when it really drops out. And it sounds kind of like McGrupp.
Yeah. I mean, I gotta say, going back to that, I mean, I don't know how many times I listened to this jam, but today, I was thinking the communication happening between the band between like minutes 16 and 20 or so, like right before Page picks up that piano solo. It just, you can tell that they're all listening to each other and reacting to what the others are doing in like this very quiet but like forceful way. It's not like Trey's kind of hanging back, and maybe that's why it seems so quiet, but you can hear them communicating with each other really intently.
Their ability to recognize where they are in the song. They're all counting, but they don't think that they're counting. They don't think about it. They just are, and they all know exactly where, and that gives them the ability, almost supernatural ability to play with silence. Right? No one's jumping in on top of anyone else. It's like they know exactly where they are in the songs, and they also know each other so well that it doesn't feel like, I think if the three of us picked up instruments and tried to do that, we'd be jumbling on top of each other. I mean, I'm assuming that we're all experts even at our craft. We still wouldn't be able to do
assumption.
That. Yeah. Meanwhile, Jonathan's the only one that probably comes close to that. But
no, it's not me.
But it's like it's something in addition to being a great musician. And you're right. Yeah, it's incredible.
Well, so again, I think a lot of credit should go to Fishman through a lot of this, because until they get to what I labeled as gooey, formless space, like he never lets up off of, at minimum, a little hi-hat tap. He is giving them something, some sort of basis. Now, whether they're playing in the same time signature as Fishman is, he's just giving them like 1, 2, 3, he's just giving them something, and they're all over the map around it and working off of each other. And then, they get to that McGrupp bit, and, Page kind of has the lead on the piano. It's a beautiful piano passage.
Gorgeous.
Trey's just playing chords, and then Page settles out, and even Mike, he's grooving against Fishman's tempo, just that it's Mike's groove that kind of gives it sort of the McGrupp feel, right? And then he lays out, and suddenly we're in that space.
Yeah.
And then the whistling.
Well, I was going to say that transcendent, beautiful jam that preceded the weirdness was, for me, like, okay, guys, end here. We already kind of basically touched the evil side. This is a great way to end.
But it's not over.
Then they don't.
It absolutely could have, too. They rise into that peak. There's no reason why they couldn't have said, Trey could have just hit whatever it is, or Phish, or somebody could have indicated, now we finish the song.
Yeah.
But they didn't.
They didn't. It's so amazing. That's like this pure transcendent bliss that would be for most musicians probably a career highlight, and then there's like, then there's 10 more minutes of just wow.
They start with whistling.
Right?
And it's so kind of, it's disturbing.
It's very disturbing.
Yeah, they're calling something, and then you realize that it's like the ghost of Lassie. But Trey, Lassie means girl, and Trey says, "Here, boy." I don't know if Trey doesn't. I didn't know that Trey didn't know that Lassie is a girl.
So there's like, it feels like multiple dog type references. There's a bit earlier in, before the Bliss Jam where they could have gone towards Dog Log, but then Trey did more of his Devil March thing. and then here, and they're whispering and going, "Here, boy," it's a little more Harpua-ish. And my friends around me were just losing their minds. And one of them says, "Are we going to get Harpua?" And I looked at him, I said, "Nah, but maybe."
Not going to happen.
We might have.
Right.
But maybe.
Absolutely. Maybe. Right.
There is in the whispering, I heard it clearly. Sometimes I listen on like home speakers and you don't hear everything that they're saying during the kind of whispering part. But at one point, Trey says a couple times, "I'm going to climb inside your head and fuck with you." And then that's like a line he repeats a couple times. And I just think that really personifies this evil Phish.
It's really great on AirPods because then he really is doing that.
Exactly.
He's really climbing in.
So what was happening in the audience at this time during this, during this end last 10 minutes where it is really just like, it's
people
insane.
My experience looking at the people around me and the few people I could see up front, people were losing it. Like, it was not everybody. Some people were probably puzzled. But the people who I was with, they were clinging to reality only barely. And it was a ride for them. I don't want to say it was rough. They all made it. But it was, and I was reasonably sober, just mostly because I was so sleep deprived from the night before and the day. It blew my mind. I was just completely astounded, but I was just engrossed watching them get up on the mic and whisper and all the little whistles and the things and like, what are we doing? And then the chant that "do it now," and then Mike just goes wow, and just completely wrinkled the entire room. Everybody just was shocked out of their the quiet reverie into some sort of it was stunning when he did that. It was great. And then that's when they started heading back. Trey starts getting some feedback on his guitar, and then suddenly we're back into the outro to Bowie.
It's a beautiful, well played ending too. It's almost like that, like they're just magically in sync, like the whole time. It just proves that they're always in sync. It's incredible. I have to talk about again, like the magic they were invoking from the dark side or something. You know that saying where anything you can't explain could be explained as magic.
Sure.
And I think this song, this Bowie jam, this 1294 Providence Bowie, kind of makes you wonder, how can a band have the ability and the confidence and the skill to improvise something like this in front of a live audience? And it truly is what's magic about Phish. And in the early 90s, their magic was on full display. The world was starting to realize, fans were enduring impossible travel conditions to go to every show they could, to not miss a jam like this. And, I'm just from the point of view of my Princeton, New Jersey pals that were friends with Trey, we'd witnessed Trey's band, become a sensation. And this kind of show and song made us realize that that's what happened.
Well, I think one of my favorite things about this, other than the music itself, is that as they finish and it ends beautifully, as you said, and the audience goes nuts, and the band takes a bow on stage in the middle of the set.
Yes.
Because they knew.
They knew.
They knew what had just happened. I mean, maybe they couldn't have explained it, but they knew that they had just been somewhere and come back.
A bow is a thank you, right? Is it a you're welcome or a thank you? Like they're almost thanking the audience for taking the trip with them.
They could have walked off the stage after that bow and not one person would have been, well, okay, let me rephrase. Somebody would have been looking at their watch going, come on. But
David Steinberg.
Yeah, exactly. We see you, timer. But most folks wouldn't have even known until they were at their car what, what had just happened. Yeah, I know. Yeah, they recognized the moment. They shared it with us. And maybe they were just appreciative that as they were tinkering with dynamics, we were allowing them to, and not,
That's amazing.
shouting for Freebird during the whistling section or whatever.
Right. It is very quiet.
A mid-set bow is amazing.
Yeah.
How many times do you guys think that's happened?
A mid-set bow?
Yeah. Not many, right?
I only know the one.
Yeah. I don't know of any others offhand. I wonder if this was the only.
Again, our Osiris research department has to start figuring that out.
Yeah. But then they decide to just they'll just keep, and they'll play Halley's Comet. It's sort of awkward to play a song after this, right? Because it's what do you do?
It's a perfect song. It's it's upbeat. It's light. We needed that.
Yeah.
It was, a light rock and dance number.
Yep.
Outstanding. Particularly the people who were feeling a bit harder. They needed some brightness to come out to, and they gave it to us. It was honestly great placement, great pacing.
Cool.
And I say that for the rest of the show. The Lizards is just beautiful. It wasn't very rare in '94, but also a perfectly played and placed Lizards, always welcome.
Yeah.
And then we get Fishman. Worth noting, we got basically 2 Fishman things this show. We got I Didn't Know in the first set with the vacuum, and then we get Cracklin' Rosie. No vacuum, but he's got the cymbals. Yeah.
Right. The ba.
And
that's, yeah.
And he cited MSG. He's like, Neil Diamond has played this song so many times. He's probably played it in Madison Square Garden. Little nod to The Next Night.
Yeah.
And then they play it.
They were definitely thinking about it. Yep, for sure.
Yeah, it's on their minds.
Yeah, awesome.
Tom, you kind of got to this before, but you started talking about it just in terms of a not missed show. I'm just wondering, do you guys see any historical significance to this show and sort of the point that it marked, besides just having this just really epic jam in it?
Jonathan, I'll let you answer that, because I kind of did that. My feeling was that, that Bowie gives a nod to this era, but in terms of the show itself, you might be able to come up with a significance to this particular show.
Well, I mean, I think you're right. That this Bowie is kind of this is what we've done this past fall, what we've learned to achieve in 1994, and often look at the New Year's runs as being that recap, look back at what they've done. And sometimes that informs the gag at New Year's or what have you. And I feel like this, David Bowie does that. And, it's not the first really big, really amazing David Bowie of the year. They did one, it was 11/26 in Minneapolis. And there are those who would argue that one's superior to this one. I feel they're wrong, but they're entitled to be wrong. To have that opinion. And I think it is a landmark show. It's also a perfect example of Phish doing the big thing on the night before the night. So this wasn't the Madison Square Garden show, which was a huge deal. This is the night before that. And they deliver this jam that maybe wouldn't have been appropriate for your Madison Square Garden debut.
Right.
Maybe.
Right.
Except if you're Phish.
Right. I mean, I think there's something to this going on the journey with them sort of thing that I think 95, as we'll get into, had many of those, especially in the summer, right? These really intense jams. But this was you guys are, when you come into this show, you're going on this unique adventure with us. And it's always been like that. But before it was maybe it was through Secret Language or through Iculus or Harpua or Mockingbird. This is we're going to do things musically that you're not going to hear ever again. And that's just, it's kind of awesome to think about that. So thank you, Jonathan, for helping me understand this even more. And maybe we should just keep we'll just talk about it again in like a couple of weeks.
We
You know how to find me.
Maybe we won't do it on a podcast, but Jonathan and I know, as RJ's friends, that we will be talking about this show again with RJ at some point. But that's it for us today. Thanks very much to our special guest, Jonathan Hart. And thanks, as always, to my co-host, RJB, and to our fellow executive producers, Benji Eisen and Matt Dwyer. We'll be back in 3 short days, and we will take that leap into 1995. Remember to review and subscribe wherever you listen or watch, and we'll see you in a couple days. Until then, blaze onward. Thank you, guys.
Osiris.